It's a snowballing thing that the way I look at this is I believe that we're on the cusp of a new evolutionary leap in human consciousness, and we're still dragging the baggage from the first evolutionary leap, the first axial period, where that sense of an individual destiny and an individual responsibility grew up in human beings sort of unanimously and spontaneously around the planet, from Zoroaster to Pythagoras to Lao Tse to the Buddha, the Old Testament prophets. All of a sudden, we had this idea of individual consciousness and individual responsibility, and along with it as the shadow side, in all the great religions that were founded in that era, comes this sense of loss or ignorance or maya or exile or a mistake or a homesickness that I think is all the shadow side of perceiving from separation and scarcity. So we've carried that baggage as part of the evolutionary leap. Nowadays, as we move forward toward developing a consciousness which will allow us to begin to perceive ourselves as a higher collectivity. And that image has been in the Western tradition for a long, long time. The mystical body of Christ in Christianity, the Adam Kadmon, the one human in Judaism. The sense that we're moving to a higher level of evolutionary organization, and that our consciousness and actually the neurological wiring is helping to support that shift. And I have no doubt that our brains are going to look different in 100 years than they look now. I mean, I'm not a biologist or a neurologist, wash out my mouth with soap, but that's my hunch. And so along the way, tools are coming that help us make that leap. And I work in my own tradition in Christianity with a meditation practice called centering prayer. I'm going to give a talk about that at this conference in a few minutes from this interview. But it started out looking just like a form of meditation. You sit down and, finally the Westerners can get into the game and meditate too. But the methodology of centering prayer is based not on keeping one's attention steadily fixed on a mantra or an object, but just when something in you recognizes you're engaged with a thought, to let the thought go. So what happens is you're practicing over and over and over in your meditation, moving your attention from an identified state attached to an object to an objectless awareness. And it doesn't last very long, but you get better at it with practice. You recognize faster when you're thinking, and you move into objectless awareness. So gradually, you're getting patterned to be able to hang out in objectless awareness for a little bit longer, and also to recognize it as the kind of matrix of what's called prayer in the tradition, and a default home for your witnessing presence. And I think this is quite huge, because when you try and carry your witnessing presence in the mind, it so easily becomes one part of your brain spying on another part of your brain. But as you simply carry it within this growing inner field of objectless awareness, a different sense of selfhood begins to emerge. So I think centering prayer in Christianity has quietly, without even knowing it's been doing it, been kind of tilling the inner physiology that prepares the ground of the person to run the non-dual program. And there are other tools for carrying it out into the world. Many tools that come to us from the Buddhist practice, Tonglen and metta meditation, and the practicing in the Christian West of a letting go of attachment and identifying practice called the welcoming practice, which again comes from centering prayer, and I think is really marvelous in helping people to release identification. Because it's identification that sends you into the small self with all its suffering and with its separated illusion. And if you can live, as I said before, in the individual consciousness without identification, it simply is a wonderful way of inhabiting a corner of the absolute as cosmic service rather than entitlement.